Here we go. All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name's Danny Kahn. I'm the Executive Director of Warner Brothers Studio Tour Hollywood, and we're so pleased to have you here as we launch our Classics Studio Tour and our tour exhibit. This new tour is a celebration of the golden age of Hollywood, designed to give fans of Warner Brothers classic film and television programs the chance to see how and where several of the most legendary storytellers of all time created the most memorable moments of entertainment history. And I couldn't think of a more appropriate occasion to launch this new tour. For today marks the 95th anniversary of the incorporation of Warner Brothers Studios. On April 4th, 1923, four Jewish immigrant brothers from Poland realized the American dream as they founded their namesake company, creating a legacy of entertainment and innovated the industry along the way. With the aspirational motto, to educate, enlighten, and entertain, Harry, Sam, Albert, and Jack set out to tell their stories that resonated with the world, often addressing socio-political issues of the time to make quality films which shape the views of future filmmakers in the world alike. This tour is a tribute to them and the films that they've inspired. This new tour is on sale now and will be available Fridays and Saturdays evenings starting in May 4th. In a few moments, I'm going to, what's this going on here? I'm going to hand off the mic to Gary Soloff, who'll be introducing you to our very special guest, whom I'm grateful to have the honor of sharing this special occasion with. But first, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Daniel Ferguson, Brad Taylor, Camila Larry, and Stephanie Trevente and the entire creative team for their unyielding efforts to bring the story of this tour to life, and to all the fans of classic film and television for your enthusiasm and requests to offer a classic studio tour. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge a very special guest among us today. Cass Warner is an accomplished documentary filmmaker, author, and granddaughter of our founder, Harry Warner. Cass, where are you?
I'm right here.
There we go. Thank you so much for joining us today, my friend. It means so much to have you here with us today. Thanks again to each one of you for joining us. I'd now like to introduce you to Mr. Gary Soloff, our Head of Marketing.
So when we were developing the Classics tour, I was like, what would be a better way to kick off this tour than to find an actor or actress that actually worked here back in the heyday? And then I realized that one of my dear friends that I met at New Year's a few years ago was that person. So spanning more than 7 decades, Carol Cooke has graced the stage and screen with her wit and whimsical charm. With a 6-picture deal here at Warner Brothers in the 60s, she completed 2 films for us: The Incredible Mr. Limpet in 1963 and Palm Springs Weekend in 1964. Then she broke her contract, but for a very good reason. She was actually called back to the stage to take the role right after Carol Channing as Dolly Levi in Hello, Dolly. Let's take a look at Carol Cooke.
Call me Naomi. Control yourself, Henry. We have a guest. Either those fish go or I do.
It was a joy to be here. I was at Warner Brothers. I was doing movies. I absolutely loved doing them. The Incredible Mr. Limpet was my first movie.
If you paid half as much attention to me as you do those fish, I'd be the happiest wife in Flatbush.
Never having done a movie, they said, hit your mark. And I went, who's Mark? Jack Weston saved my life. He went, Carol, it's on the floor. It's the mark.
The only thing I ever put in my orange juice is gin.
The movies are America and are fabulous, and you can still learn from them. See great scenes, great work. I can't wait to see what's going to happen.
That's better. Come back in the slow season and I'll give you special rates.
And helping Warner Brothers curate and launch the Classics Made Here tour, the world's most respected film critic and historian, Leonard Maltin, is here with us today to tell stories of the golden age of Hollywood with Carol. Please give a big round of applause for Carol Cooke and Leonard Maltin.
What a surprise. Oh, hello, everybody.
I don't know, with
that's the surprise.
this many red curtains, I feel like an old stripper.
and everybody else.
You're blind.
No, but you carry yourself in a youthful way. You don't live in the past.
No, I don't.
No, so that's it. You're a person of the present, but you're also here as a witness and participant. You know, those movies Carol made here are more than 50 years old, and yet Carol is not in a retirement home.
It was 50 years ago, and I'm only 34. How
Yeah.
does that add up?
I know. That's why it's so cool to have her here. You know, the thing about this lot that I love is, well, the thing I love about this lot is everything. But what I think a lot of you can share is that as we walk around these standing sets, streets and the town square and all of this, you memories are triggered. Someone just said to me, "Isn't that the Gilmore Girls' house?" Yes. If that's your memory, if that's what you grew up watching, then that's what it means to you. The house behind me, somebody just said, "Gremlins?" Yes, it's the Gremlins house, and 50 others. Everywhere you turn, there's something that's a memory, whether it's The Music Man, with Robert Preston and Shirley Jones, or if we go a little further around the bend there, Little Caesar, Evergy Robinson, Bogart movies like The Maltese Falcon. The list just doesn't stop, because this was a home base, and it's not often done anymore. It was standard operating procedure to shoot as much on the studio lot in those days as you could, and that was interiors and exteriors. So I asked Carol the other day about Palm Springs weekend. I said, "How much time did you actually spend in Palm Springs?" So tell us.
Well, the funny part was we were in Palm Springs at an actual motel. And then to do the swimming pool scenes, we came back to the lot here and they built a swimming pool, which I thought was rather strange since there was a pool in Palm Springs. But that was the movies then. Now they go to practically all of the locations.
Sure. Now, location filming is a standard operating principle, but it wasn't then. The idea was to keep as much control as possible and to keep costs down too. And so they had at one time 3 different stages on this lot that had deep water tanks that could be used for Incredible Mr.
The
Limpet,
Incredibles.
that could be used for Busby Berkeley's big production number like By a Waterfall back in the 30s, that could be used for, one of them was just used for Dunkirk last year. So these investments they've made in the standing sets have paid them back many times over. And it also gives us this, as I said, this instant connection to memories of movies we've all watched and TV shows we've all enjoyed. Another standing set, again, around the bend was the Chicago set for ER. There's an elevated train station there, and for a while when I would bring friends on this lot, that's what they would connect to right away. It's the ultimate in make-believe, because if you walk in, if you see somebody walking into a motel room in Palm Springs, and then it cuts to the interior of the room, you just believe they're walking into that room, when in fact they're walking into one room in Palm Springs, and the minute they go inside the door, they're here on this lot, on a sound stage. It's the simplest of illusions, but the most persuasive of illusions, I think. And when you got here, as they've just mentioned, you were far from a movie veteran. You'd done stage, you'd done television, you'd been mentored by Lucille Ball. That's no small achievement. And but you hadn't made a movie. So
Incredible Mr. Limpet was my first movie. And it was fabulous because I was working with, for the Incredible Mr. Limpet, with the director Arthur Lubin. And my second picture, Palm Springs Weekend, was with the famous director Norman Torog. Now, they were both veterans, and they'd been around the block a few times. They were terrific. But I remember one particular thing with Norman Torog. I was standing, you know, this was Palm Springs weekend. It was full of young people, and we all wore very light lipstick and big hair. And I remember Norman Torog, who's kind of a smart aleck, and I loved him. But I was standing next to him, and one of the guys in the movie, who shall go nameless, was this great hunk, you know, like, oh, but dumb as hell. And I mean, he was so pretty you could lick him like an ice cream cone, but you wouldn't want to talk to him. Anyway, I'm standing there by Norman Torog, and Norman Torog is trying to get him to do a line correctly, something like, come over here, you know, come over here. And Norman Torog looked at me and he said, you know, he should will his brain to UCLA. I said, whatever for? He said, it's never been used. True story.
And Norman Torog dated back to the silent movie era. He made,
I wasn't there then.
No, but you heard him talk about it perhaps. He made movies for decades and decades, and this man who directed W.C. Fields, who directed Mickey Rooney and Spencer Tracy in Boys Town, who directed Fred Astaire, who directed the giants of the golden age of Hollywood, wound up as Elvis Presley's favorite director and directed a whole raft of Elvis movies. He was a pretty amazing guy. And Arthur Lubin was his testament, I guess you'd say, is three things. He directed Abbott and Costello in their first and most successful movies. He then directed Francis the Talking Mule, which was so successful for Universal, that other studio out here in the valley, that after that he said, well, if you can't beat him, join him. And he produced and directed Mr. Ed, another talking animal movie, and was a very colorful guy who refused to explain how they made the jaws move on the animals. That was his big secret that he was going to keep. I interviewed him toward the end of his life, and I said, you're not going to tell me, are you? He said, no. And that was that. You can speculate on your own whether any kind of physical trickery. Apparently no harm was done to either animal, but they sure worked. They worked, and so these guys worked all the time.
Yeah, I remember Arthur Lubin in The Incredible Mr. Limpet. Don Knotts, who was fabulous, it turns into a fish, and it's a fantasy. And he was an adorable man, but they wanted the voice of Ladyfish. I played his wife. He dumps me for Ladyfish. So their first idea was to use my voice because Ladyfish was animated. And so they wanted me to talk very high and very southern and be like this. So I did it, you know, I was so excited. I thought, oh, I'll get to do the voice of Ladyfish too. And Arthur Lubin heard me and came in and he said, do that again, Carol. He said, we can't use you. You sound like a drag queen. I said, I am Blanche.
The animation in The Incredible Mr. Limpet was done by the same team that had been working on the Warner Brothers cartoons, but they were no longer employed by Warner Brothers. The studio shut down their legendary animation unit right at that time, but Friz Freleng, who had been here from the very beginning, he animated and then directed on the first Warner Brothers cartoons ever in 1930. So he'd been there over 30 years. He and a guy who'd been the business manager there formed a company called DePatie Freleng. And one of their first jobs was doing The Incredible Mr. Limpet with an all-star team of animators. And that was so successful that I think the very same year, 63 and into 64, they got a job. They were doing commercials, whatever came along. They got a job from Blake Edwards doing the main title for his movie The Pink Panther. And that set them off on another track. They won an Oscar for the first Pink Panther short they did, and it all was a result of all this experience they had at Warner Brothers.
Wasn't that wonderful? Give it up again. So thank you, Carol and Leonard, and a special thank you to Tom Troop. Carol's husband is here, right back here. Wave, wave, Tom.
I'm married to a depressed Italian. Everybody else I know is bring on the plastic flowers. Tom's going, I think it's going to rain.
And you've been married for what, 54 years?
Yes, I was 11 when we married.
That's right, I remember that. So listen, you can actually see Carol perform in a one-woman show in New York, June 19th and 20th at Feinstein's 54 and Below. It'll be her debut after, you didn't get to do it earlier this
The
year.
last time I was in New York was 42nd Street when I did the last time to be on Broadway. My husband and I both, we just go where the work is. We divide our time between Broadway and here, you know, and it's great. All of it's great. We've had a fabulous time, and good times and bum times, as the song says, I'm still here. Okay?
Thank you very much. So now we're gonna start with our scheduled interviews, and then we'll also, if you're wearing a gold badge, you're gonna go to our carts for the abbreviated tour, and if you have a black, I wrote this on my hand. If you have a black badge, you'll be going straight to stage 48 to see the exhibit. So once again, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And have a great day.
Has anybody been here to the studio before? Yeah. Yay! Do you have a favorite place to visit on the studio?
I like singing Stars Hollow.
Oh, well, this is it. So you're in Stars Hollow. We're going to be coming back here at the end of the tour as well because your car is parked in here. Does anybody want to know anything about any of the structures on this street before we head out?
Well, you told me the name of it. Are you going to say that again?
It's King's Row. It was named after a Ronald Reagan movie back in 1941. That was the title of the film. He was in a house that would have been right around over here. It was torn down about 4 years ago to make room for our gift shop. Yay! And also a couple of other buildings that are over here now as well. And on the back side of it would have been the last existing set from the last existing set here at the studio from Blazing Saddles, if anybody's a fan. There were some facades erected, and all of this would have been sort of a western town over here at that time. We used to have a series of western backlot sets. The sets change up over the years, but this is one of the constants that we've had since the 1940s. And he's going to be on a loudspeaker, so I should probably do that too so all you guys can hear me. And please ask me questions. If we're driving by anything and I'm not talking about it or you want to know more about anything in particular, my name is Tommy or Thomas. It really depends on how formal you want to be.
It was good.
In
We
the
did,
in
yeah.
the friends.
I know we were so hungry.
Okay, we're not going to follow Walt. We're going to San Francisco at that time. So it's gone from the Barbary Coast of San Francisco to New York to Chicago on ER. That's, of course, Mr. Malton was talking about. George Clooney's apartment from ER was right here. Come on over this way, folks. But that's about all you're going to get, just a little bit of space. So we don't really film inside of these buildings. We mostly use for exteriors. So again, movies like Angels with Dirty Faces, if you see a nice sweeping vista of the street, that one in the background up there, it's going to be a crane shot or it's going to be somebody setting up a camera on a catwalk inside. Yeah. You just want to go back and your cars aren't even in that lot, are they?
No.
Bring it. Oh yeah, cool man. So yeah. Okay, well, did you need some fundraising?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Kidding. All right, cool. So yeah.
Like 5'5" right now.
Yeah. They were all so tiny. Like everybody back then was just tinier all around somehow. I live a mile and a half.
I don't have to go near it. Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is exactly where those costumes
But in part, the better than hamster. Had a
So now I have a collection, and I'm doing guitars as well. They're not Oh, are you? I've got a bunch of art. Are you looking for a kid's card stuff? Actual classic tour someday. Cheers.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
It was
I appreciate it. It's fun for me too.
Yeah,
I didn't have to toss up.